this thing doing anything at all? Can you guys hear me at the back? No? Okay. You're good. How about you guys right in the back row? Can you hear me? Okay, cool. All right, this will be good then. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Get your tickets today. Find a seat, find a seat. Hit it. You got it? Okay. All right. I didn't even have to tell you where the button was. You're pretty good. Yeah.
He has experience.
Okay.
Okie dokie. Good morning, class. Or should I say fancy meat computers?
Yes.
There we go. So, how the heck are you?
Good. So good.
Awesome. Everybody super pleased with the registrar's office for booking this class for 8:30 in the morning?
So please, so please. So
Yeah.
I consider it like an actual revenge for how many cheating happened in modern history.
Yeah, possibly. Well, you know. If that would be, if that is karma, it's coming from a higher authority than any university bureaucracy because they simply lack the time and ability to be able to exact revenge using the schedule. I think that it's probably some kind of higher power that would be doing that, if anybody. But, yeah, pretty much everybody in the room's had me before for one thing or another. Most of you. Has anybody not seen me before? A couple of people? Oh, come on. So, my name is Dr. Nicholas Moore. I am going to be teaching you algorithms. This is going to be a different kind of class than the kind of class you may be used to me teaching you with respect to, you know, 1MB3 if you took it with me, or 1XC3 with me if you took it while I was teaching it. This is a different kind of course. We're not necessarily going to be as focused on sort of the nuts and bolts of programming at the sort of direct syntactic level. This is more like, I was thinking what a good analogy for this would be. If it's anything, it would be more like an anatomy class. What I expect you to pick up over the course of this course is the structure, right? And hopefully the structures that compose all of the types of computations and systems that you'll all be using hopefully in your future careers. If you're good, you will be able to pick up the general design philosophies behind these data structures and algorithms that we're going to talk about. And you sort of imbibe a different way of thinking about data. And if you do that sufficiently well, you may even, at some point in the future, be able to come up with your own unique algorithms that operate on the same level as the well-venerated algorithms that we are going to talk about in this class. One thing to understand about the algorithms that we're going to talk about in this class is that pretty much every single one of them has a deep history and provenance that, you can trace these things back through many, many academic papers of analysis and design, with the possible exception of the ones that we're going to be talking about today, which are so dang basic that it's not so much the algorithm for the algorithm's sake that would, design something like a linked list, more like the, it was like the natural consequence of the existence of pointers and stuff like that. So, yeah. Everybody cool with pointers at this point? You good with them? So-so? You have no idea what I'm talking about? All right. Well, you'll have to learn quickly now. Yeah, anyway. All right, so administrative details. You know me. This is when my office hours are this semester. I've been moved. I've been promoted to a room which is exactly twice the room that I was at before. So look for me there. Does it? Oh, that's a typo. I should really get my act together.
You should just start at exactly 1:30.
Yeah. Actually, that probably would be more like the case because I usually have people talk to me after class, and that's after class. But anyway, so for this course, you have 5 TAs. One of those TAs is currently being screwed around with by Immigration Canada and may or may not actually be joining us this semester, which is apparently a thing that's been happening to a lot of students this semester, which, you know, it's like in the spring I knew that it was really hard to get passports out of the passport office, and now it seems that, you know, the issuing of student visas and that sort of thing is now entered such a, you know, mode of chaos that they're no longer even respecting FIFO, and we're going to be talking about FIFO today, which is to say, the structure has degraded to the point where it's no longer even a queue, virtual or in person. But we're going to be talking about queues, so that's fun. So most of you should know about the YouTube channel. So all of these sessions will be recorded. Thank you very much. After the lecture has occurred, I will upload the recording to my YouTube channel. This is not an excuse to not come to class. This is designed primarily so that you have secondary reference material should you want to watch back part of the lecture that perhaps you didn't have such a great time with the first time, something like that. But yeah, so things will be recorded. At some point during this semester, which, you know, the exact point at which this will occur is unknown, but at some point during the semester I will need to move the lectures in their entirety online for a period of 2 weeks or so, because my wife is having a baby. It's our second, actually. What?
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, essentially, I'm not sure like how familiar you guys are with like the process towards the end of a pregnancy, but essentially, there's a 4 to 5 week period wherein the baby is most likely to be born. It's kind of interesting, actually. If you have like a graph of time versus probability of the baby, it looks like that, with this point being right here, in our case being October 31st. So it sort of ramps up linearly until the due date, and then after that point drops off steeply, and if you get to like, you know, this point, they induce you, right? So it's kind of funny. If the baby has to be induced, it'll probably be on my wife's birthday, which is kind of funny, you know. But yeah, so essentially, I don't know when inside of this time frame that's going to happen, but it could be anywhere from like Thanksgiving to Remembrance Day, basically. So at some point, it's going to happen. I'm going to have to give my lectures from home for a couple of weeks to try to make sure my wife doesn't get out of bed too much, especially if it's a bloody C-section, which is, you know, terrible. Very interesting. Did you know that there's like a double the likelihood of having a C-section if you have an obstetrician deliver your baby versus a midwife. It's very interesting, eh? And did you know every time you have a C-section that decreases your fertility for secondary subsequent pregnancies? Because there's like scar tissue in the uterus that might prevent placental attachment. It's very interesting. Anyway, that's not what the class is about. Anyway, so that's going to happen. I hope that you will bear with me while that is happening, and you know, we'll get through it one way or another, and perhaps there will be cute baby photos of very, very young babies in the future. We'll see. So anyway, we've got. Oh, by the way, Nancy is the one who's being put through the ringer by immigration. So that's T2 tutorial. We may have to hire a different TA. We'll see how it goes. It's kind of hard to get grad TAs this time at this late hour, so I might have to settle for an undergraduate. Although I find generally undergraduates work harder because they're not guaranteed their positions. No, it's absolutely true. Because grad students are guaranteed their positions, they absolutely don't work as hard. It's unionism. Stupid unions. Anyway. So, if you're here, then you've passed the prerequisites, of course. There's this interesting thing that they've done now with the first year program where you have to like start getting B's in certain things so long as you're not actually in the comp sci program. So, you know, I don't think they're applying this past entry to the second level. So once you're in the second level, I think you should be good to, you know, do as badly in the course as you like without failing. It's like Price is Right rules, right? Except in reverse. Anyway, so let's talk about the learning objectives of this course, right? So by the end of the course, you will be able to analyze, you'll be able to, like, this is a course not just on learning the algorithmic processes of various well-known algorithms. This is also a course on understanding the mathematics by which those algorithms are analyzed and knowing what the comparative strengths and weaknesses are, you know, the trade-offs in various situations. You'll find a lot of the time you can spend a little memory to gain a little runtime and vice versa, right? It depends on what kind of application you're going for, right? But anyway, so in general, this course is divided into 5 sections. We will be talking about basic sorts, basic searches. We'll talk about elementary data structures. It's kind of like the elementary data structures are mixed into the algorithms. As we're going to discover very quickly in this course, there's much less distinction between an algorithm and a data structure than you may think, right? Because like up to, you know, your sort of naive impression going into this course perhaps is that a data structure is something that you set up that has particular structure and, you know, you think about it in the way that you would think about a class having properties and, you know, using itself recursively and stuff like that. And then algorithms would be, you know, straight code that operate, right? Well, the algorithm is designed in concert with the data structure, and the data structure is designed to serve the algorithm, right? They are really 2 sides of the same coin. So if you understand the algorithm, and you know, basically I don't think you can understand the algorithm without understanding the data structure and vice versa. They go hand in hand, right? Anyway, so we're going to be talking about quick sort, merge sort, heap sort. I might even do shell sort with you guys if you're interested in it. We'll do binary search, we'll do search trees, we'll do hashing. Yes, like hashtags. We will also be covering stacks, queues, priority queues, search trees, hash tables, tries, and graph representations. Basically, up to the point that we start talking about graphs, you won't necessarily need to learn much in the way of new mathematics. However, once we start getting into graph theory, we're going to have to talk a little bit more and expand your minds with respect to mathematics, unless they covered it extensively in 1DM3, which is prerequisite for this course. Did they do graph theory?
They did like 1 week.
They did 1 week on graph theory? Okay. Well, that's not terrible, I guess. I think graphs are pretty easy, like to understand at a very high level.
We have
so.
2LC3 again, so
Yeah.
you'll learn more about that.
Okay. Well, in that case, graph theory is a mathematical abstraction that will follow you through your careers in this program, and this is yet another course that's going to touch on it, perhaps in more depth and detail than other courses have. Like a full quarter, I think we do 3 weeks on graph theory and graph algorithms, so there you go. We will also talk about string algorithms. So there you go. You are expected to be able to analyze the runtime of algorithms, identify time-memory trade-offs in designing data structures and algorithms, understand implementation issues for algorithm study, given a problem such as searching, sorting, graph, or string problems, select from a range of possible algorithms, and provide justification for the algorithm you select. You must be given, we'll give you an application, and you will select the algorithm which is appropriate for that application. This has to do with, when you memorize an algorithm, you must also memorize the preconditions for that algorithm and, the trade-offs. You need to know stuff about the algorithm in addition to the algorithm itself. Pardon me. You should also be able to reduce or decompose a given application into the problems already studied. Good. So, now for the part everyone's been waiting for, the manner of your assessment. There will be 4 assignments in this class, each worth 7% of your final grade. There will be 1 midterm test worth 30% of your final grade, and 1 final examination, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be the final examination, worth 42%. So, it's probably made the rounds at this point that the language of study for this class will be Java. Cue groaning. It's okay, you can groan audibly. Thank you. So, it kind of is and it isn't, though. Java is certainly going to be the language of preference with respect to when we examine implementations. Those implementations will be in Java. However, the textbook for this course, as well as the slides, focus on elements of the Java programming language which sort of fit neatly into the common object-oriented language framework that you're probably already reasonably familiar with. The sort of first-class members of the language that we're going to deal with on a daily basis are going to be things like if statements and loops and all of the things that you're normally familiar with, hopefully. There are going to be a few points where we are going to have to study some specific Java constructs in order to understand the examples. We have a few slides on generics, for example, in the upcoming slide set 1. But in general, for a course that uses Java, the presence of Java in that course is relatively light, which is probably just as well, given that Java is a dying language. It's what the textbook gave me. You don't have to thank me, thank the textbook. But yeah, it's interesting. I was asking the prof who taught this last year about the Java component. And apparently last year, assignment submissions in pseudocode were accepted. So there you go. You don't even have to worry about syntax. And that's sort of like, that's kind of the course in general. We want to try to avoid getting bogged down in the implementation details of particular languages so that we can study the mathematical framework which is common to most or all of them. Right? Any questions about any of this so far? This really is a pretty good class for an 8:30 start.
It's first lecture.
Yeah, well, first lecture, that's true. Oh, question, sorry.
Which JDK will be used?
Sorry?
Which Java compiler will be used? Like which Java version will be used?
I saw you.
Oh, sorry.
Whichever one you want. You know, as the shouldn't like matter too much which one you use, as long as it is Java. But there will be a tutorial in the first week about that sort of thing. Yes.
For the midterm and final exam, will there be a cheat sheet allowed?
Haven't decided yet. Probably though. I think that's fair.
Later as a cheat sheet.
It won't be open book, I can tell you that much. I tried doing a properly open book, you know, supervised test for 1MB3, and it was a disaster, absolute disaster. People were like pulling only marginally related code to the question off of slides and like inserting it into their test solutions. It was absolute like bedlam. Question?
Will we be using Jupyter Hub or something like that?
No. I haven't this is my first time teaching the course, so you'll forgive me if I'm a little fuzzy on the details so far, but my understanding is that it's more like assignments should be submitted using LaTeX, like written in LaTeX and then submitted. That's sort of more the flavor we're going for here. We're not as interested in you guys producing like working code so much as understanding the structure of code. That's why we're here in this class. Make sense? I know that like most of you are like used to me beating you over the head with a sledgehammer. Your code needs to compile. If it doesn't compile, then it is a pile of doo-doo. But this is not the sort of course that we're in today, so praise be. Good. So, anyway. MSAF policy. Invoking an MSAF for any assignment will result in a 3-day extension on the due date. You must, however, submit within those 3 days or else your assignment will be considered late, and late assignments are not accepted. If you MSAF the test, then you will be writing a 72% final exam, which I wouldn't recommend, but not as a measure of first resort anyway. But if you truly are genuinely terribly ill, then you know, there you go. So here's our rough timeline. This will give you the week in which the test happens, as well as when the assignments are coming out and all of the topics that are being covered, etc. First 2 weeks will be fundamentals, after which we will talk about sorting, then searching, then graphs, strings, and the final exam. So, oh, we do 2 weeks of graph theory? We'll see. We'll see. So, there is a textbook for this course. It is Algorithms 4th edition by Sedgwick and Wayne. It's big. It's a big hardcover red book. Although, you know, who cares about physical copies anymore? You are not required to purchase the book. It doesn't have problems in it that will be doing or anything like that. However, if you want some reference material, or perhaps a souvenir, it's there for you. There are some other recommended texts as well. Introduction to Algorithms, 3rd edition, the 2001 book by Corman, Leeserson, Grimsek, and Stein. This book bears special mentioning because it's like too graduate level for this course, you know? But if you do go on to grad school and you take the grad level equivalent of this course, that will be the textbook that you will use for that course, most probably. It is the standard textbook for algorithm study at a graduate level. It is also seen as, it's like 30% textbook for a course, 70% encyclopedia on algorithms. So even if you never study it at that level, it's still an extremely useful book to have. And I would say almost that no computer scientist worth their salt does not have that sitting on their shelf. So I would recommend the Corman book over and above the official textbook for this course, in fact. But, you know, that's just me. So aside from that, we have a Piazza forum that will be running this semester, which I think a number of you are probably familiar with, the Piazza forums. So, yeah, any questions? So far, so bog standard, right? Question?
Do we know on what day the test will fall?
I haven't been able to extract a date from bookings yet, but as soon as I know, you'll know, and I'm going to be rattling their cage pretty ferociously this first week. So, yeah. Unfortunately, no, I don't know what the test is yet, but I know what week it will be in. Good. I'm kind of at the mercy of the booking system. So, right. All right. So far as it goes, shall we get into it then? Beauty. So, this first lecture will cover data structures that you are most likely already familiar with. However, it will give a slightly more formal treatment of these data structures so that you can perhaps become familiar with the manner in which we will be talking about algorithms in this class. So, you know, we're going to have some pseudocode show up in this lecture that will perhaps be useful or interesting to you, for you to see and to understand that this is how we're going to start to think about it. So, that, etc. There we go. So, it is fitting that a course on algorithms should begin with a definition of an algorithm. So, in computer science, an algorithm is used to describe a finite, deterministic, and effective problem solving method suitable for implementation as a computer program. So, what does finite mean?
It has an end.
It has an end. What does deterministic mean?
It produces the same result every time.
It produces the same result every time. What does effective mean?
It does what it's supposed to do.
Sorry?
It does what it's supposed to do, what it was made for.
Well, it's not necessarily the concept of like you would have an effective individual, which is kind of the sense you're using it in. Like an effective person has those properties. In computer science, when we say effective, what we mean is simply that a computer exists on which it can be implemented, right? So it can be effective is what the definition of effective that we're using here. Make sense? Cool. So, space and time complexity are very important aspects of algorithm design. We are generally concerned with how quickly the required space and time increases as we increase the size of the input. How many of you remember or have heard of big O notation? How many? No. A couple of people. So, you know what big O notation stands for? No? Okay.
If you're not asking, I don't.
Okay.
Is it order?
Order of?
Order of growth.
Order of growth. That's right. That's what the O in big O stands for, is order of growth. So, in general, if you're trying to process a list with X number of elements in it, and it takes you, X squared amount of time to process that, then that's big O X, or N squared, right? If you, N more properly, usually. So, a good algorithm, was it something I said? A good algorithm, probably just going to that. A good algorithm design can process millions of objects millions of times faster than a bad one. So this is a very interesting result, actually. The difference between a good algorithm and a bad algorithm is multiplied by the number of things that you're trying to process. If you have a logarithmic algorithm, such as binary search, once you have, you can search something using binary search in the tens of millions in, I think, something like 21 or 22 steps, right? Whereas a linear search of the same data set will obviously take tens of millions of operations to search the same data set. So this, algorithmic complexity matters. It has a great effect on the runtime, right? These types of algorithmic optimizations are far superior, much as I am loath to admit it as a mechatronics major myself, but these algorithmic techniques are much more powerful at optimization than hardware, the types of hardware optimizations that you may perform. Hardware optimization can still yield excellent results, but a hardware implementation, no matter how efficient, of a poor algorithm will be worse than that of a good algorithm. Make sense? Good. Hardware optimization is beyond the scope of this course. Algorithms are generally procedures for solving problems. They can be encoded in natural language. Boo! I want to hear it. Boo! Pseudocode. And actual computer language. Yay! Thank you. Pseudocode is a middle ground between natural language and computer language, combining elements of both. You'll find a lot of the time in pseudocode that specific details are hand-waved away, right? The specifics of syntax are normally pseudocode in theory should be implementable in a large number of different programming languages. In order to avoid making pseudocode that fits Java better or fits C better or something like that, the attempt is to create a meta-language which includes the essential common components of all of these imperative languages without including the syntactic details of any of them, right? We will very much still see things like if statements, assignment statements, loops, functions, all of these types of things. Often functions will be used without being defined in pseudocode. You're just kind of, you know, it's assumed, oh, well, it says it's going to search, so it'll search, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, called subroutines need not be explicitly defined. So the pseudocode style that we will be using, because of course there's no such thing as a universal language. Anytime anybody tries to develop a universal language, it's kind of like religions. Every time you develop a new religion that tries to encompass all the previous religions, you just end up with another religion. The same is true of programming languages. So we will be using the pseudocode style of the algorithm, Introduction to Algorithms 3rd edition book, which I mentioned as being the superior and far and away standard reference for algorithms study at the graduate level. Make sense so far? All right. So let's study some elementary data structures. Or let's talk about what a data structure is first. So, this should come as no surprise. A data structure is a scheme for organizing data that leaves them amenable to efficient processing by an algorithm. A good example of this is the binary search algorithm, right? Who can tell me what the precondition is for binary search? User.
It has to be a sorted.
Yes. Yeah, the thing that you're sorting, or the thing that you're searching must be sorted, right? So, you can design data structures, you can design a class, for instance, such that the data that is stored within it is always sorted, right? To insert one element into an existing linear data structure, such as an array, while maintaining the sortedness of that array, who has a guess as to what the time complexity of that type of an operation would be? Yes, sir?
Login.
Search
for the position.
Right. If you're
Not
using
for a list, yeah.
Yeah, if you're using
If it's like a dictionary, wait, no. If it's a hash,
let's just assume it's a simple array for now. But yes.
login.
Yeah. If it is sorted, then you need to find the position at which you need to insert the new element. If it's sorted, then you can use the binary search to do that, right? So, to insert an element into an array that is sorted and maintain sortedness is a logarithmic time algorithm, right? So, to maintain, basically to maintain sortedness as a property inside of a class, you increase the time of the insertion procedure from a constant time algorithm where you just slap it on the end to a logarithmic time algorithm where you carefully put it in its proper place, and then you can search it in logarithmic time. It depends on how frequently you search versus how frequently you insert, right? In something where, you only search once for every million elements that you add, it's probable that you don't want to do that, right? However, if you're searching 1,000,000 times for every element you add, that would be a different scenario, right? Make sense? These are the types of trade-offs, these are the types of things that we need to be thinking about now that we are coming to a more mature understanding of our selected discipline, which is computer science. So, more precisely, a data structure is a set of values and a set of operations on those values. So, we're sort of properly in object-oriented thinking land. We are considering data structures as including algorithmic elements or procedural elements. We are not just talking about manners of organizing data. We are talking about the operations on those data being packaged up with them. This is, again, object-oriented thinking, right? So basically all of these things that we're talking about will be objects in this, probably composed of sub-objects, simpler ones, some of which we're going to talk about today. So, data structures serve as the basis for abstract data types, which is basically what the slides are going to call classes throughout. Algorithms and data structures go hand in hand and are central objects in the study of computer science. Search algorithms, research on, sorting algorithms goes like all the way back to the invention of the computer itself. So these, again, are structures that have had long and arduous study. And again, class isn't over yet. We still got 10 more minutes. I can see, I heard it. I heard everybody going for the bag. You develop a sixth sense for this. So, algorithms require preconditions, such as binary search requiring the data to be sorted. Data structures are designed to maintain such preconditions. You may consider the manner in which the data has been organized itself to be a precondition. If you are performing a search over a binary search tree, the fact that the data has been organized into a binary search tree is a precondition for the application of the binary search tree algorithm, right? Or the search for binary search tree, BST search, anyway. Good. So, we're going to talk about arrays and linked lists, which are, as elementary data structures go, the most elementary of the data structures. How many people have covered linked lists before? How many people have not? This is good. Oh, come on. Jeez. Wiseacre in the front row, jeez. So, let's just remind ourselves what an array is. When we're operating in Java land, we're kind of operating in, we're operating closer to C than we are Python. So the thing about Python is that it will build a lot of the data structures that we're talking about into the language itself in the forms of dictionaries and lists and sets and all of these sorts of things. But we are concerning ourselves now not with the mere elementary use of such fine pieces of code. We are interested in how they actually work. So that means that under the hood, everything is arrays and pointers, just like it is in C, right? So, an array is a linear data structure containing a finite number of elements with a specified order. Elements are stored or retrieved using a numeric index. You can also think in a more mathematical way, you can think of this as a mapping between the natural numbers and the set of the elements of the array, right? Where each natural number maps to only one element of the array. Or, yeah, so it would be a bijective relation anyway. So, these are typically, but not always, stored in contiguous memory. What does contiguous mean? It's not quite the same thing as continuous. Yes?
It's all touching itself?
It's all touching itself, yes. So, that is to say, ha 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 ha, thanks guys. The point, okay, it's not, come on. What are you, like 3 years old? Jeez. The idea with contiguous memory essentially is that there are no gaps in between, right? You can start, like the start point of the array and the end point of the array are fixed, and everything in between is in the array, right? This is you know, if you remember back to your C programming, this is the reason that in languages such as C, array indexing boils down to memory address manipulation through arithmetic, right? The index that you're trying to access is a simple, you know, offset calculation from the beginning index of the array. This is why accessing any particular element of an array, given its index, is a constant time operation, because it takes a constant amount of time to calculate an offset, regardless how big that offset is, right? So, there you go. Arrays may be static. Sorry, question?
Is this stack or heap or like either the contiguous memory?
So it depends. If it's a static array, normally it's being put in stack memory. If it's a dynamic array, normally it's being put in heap memory. Again, it's kind of got a big asterisk on the end of it saying, you know, you could probably figure out a way to not do that if you really wanted to, but that's where it's put by default. If you're ever curious about whether it's being stored in stack or heap memory, if you use Python Tutor's C mode, or I don't know if it has a Java mode, but it'll tell you whether it's being stored in stack or heap memory, which is kind of cool. But anyway, so arrays may be static, which is to say of fixed size at creation, or they may be dynamic, which is to say of variable size. Anybody who took, I was about to say anybody who took 1xc3 should know the difference between those two, but I'm not convinced that you do. So, anybody who took it with me sure as heck does. So, you guys, when you studied C, you did malloc and calloc and realloc, all of those operations.
Yeah.
Those are your dynamic memory operations. So when I say dynamic, it's structurally between its being sized or resized, it functions precisely the same as a static array. The only difference is that you can perform operations on it to resize it. This is like not quite like, this isn't the same level of dynamism as we're going to see in linked lists. Linked lists are a lot more dynamic than this. But it's, you know, okay for arrays. Arrays are the simplest data structure. So typically in an array, all elements are of the same data type, particularly in C. In C, the amount, like the offset to access any particular element of an array is calculated based on the size of the elements in the array, because, you know, if it's 4 bits long, then to jump 3 bits, you have to go, or if it's 4 bytes, and to go 3 indexes, you need to jump 12 bytes. Like, the compiler has to know that, right? So that's why arrays are monotyped in lower level languages like C, right? But yeah, any questions about arrays before we I think we're probably out of time actually.
2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes. 2 minutes is enough time for a question if somebody has a question. Yes, sir.
Are linked lists indexed, like, could you perform a binary search?
So the efficiency of the binary search algorithm, if you guys, could I have your attention for just a few minutes, because this is actually an interesting question and pertinent to the course. So the question is, could you perform binary search on a linked list? And I know that we haven't quite gotten to linked lists, but you know, I'll answer your question anyway. So item lookup in a linked list requires traversal of that list, right? So in contrast to a straight array, which has constant time lookup, a linked list has big O of n lookup, right? So you could do binary search, but binary search itself would expand to at least a big O n operation. because one of its subroutines has all been similarly expanded, right? Like in theory, you could, like in a doubly linked list, it wouldn't be as bad, like you could come up with a slightly more efficient interpretation, right? But like, pardon me, the binary search algorithm relies on the ability to calculate what the middle element of the data structure is, right? But a linked list, unless you're doing extra bookkeeping, doesn't know like where the middle is. Yeah, it doesn't have a fixed size. That being said, it's hypothetically possible that you could build into the class, you know, the bookkeeping necessary to remember its own middle and keep a pointer to it, right? But what are you going to do? Keep a middle to that, and like keep a middle to this section, keep a middle to that section, that, right? Because you need that to do the algorithm recursively, right?
But I'm sure there are more like efficient algorithms that are suited to like this.
Yeah. So, you know,
You just do linear.
you can, yeah, linear search, like at a certain point, you can have a very, very, very clever algorithm that would probably still end up being something like big O N, or you could just do linear search, right? Because sometimes we're also optimizing for the size of the program.
So we're assuming that it doesn't